I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right? I mean,
no,
when
Senator,
it's Biden, it's okay.
No.
When it's Biden, oh, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy.
Welcome back to Conservative Call, Patriots. Before we dive into this absolutely infuriating display of liberal hypocrisy, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to stay informed about the constant attacks on our constitutional republic. Ring that.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's great to have this hearing. Thanks for calling it. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. Professor Shaw, nice to see you again. Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and they have been abused.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait.
No.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions are a problem.
What is the principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential consideration.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
and why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think that's
what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are injured.
No, you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, oh, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is it the same
I believe
thing?
In a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle?
Power.
What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this
concede that
was
as a
never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator. And the 1960s is where some scholars sort of locate the beginning
Can you
of this, but
identify one
others,
before then?
Mila Sahoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first, and others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are no meaningful constraints on the president is a very dangerous system of law.
That's not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every president
You
is
said that is not what you said. You said it was a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
the Supreme Court senator agreed 9-0 with me on that.
You also said when Joe Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed. And the combination of parties without standing and the single judge division.
We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case where no one had standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all of that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as
function.
majority rule. When you get the majority you like, you're for the nationwide injunction. When you don't, you're not.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you the opportunity that I often found absolutely precious when I was arguing before a panel of judges and couldn't get my answer.
What you're about to witness is a perfect example of everything wrong with our current legal and academic establishment. Senator Josh Hawley just exposed a liberal law professor in what might be the most devastating takedown of judicial activism I've ever seen. This isn't just about legal theory, folks. This is about the systematic weaponization of our court system against conservative presidents and the American people. Professor Shaw, the supposed expert on constitutional law, just got completely dismantled by Senator Hawley for displaying the exact kind of partisan double standard that's destroying faith in our institutions. When Biden was getting hit with nationwide injunctions, Shaw called them travesties for democracy. But when it's Trump getting hammered by activist judges issuing these same nationwide injunctions, suddenly it's perfectly fine. Let me break down what's really happening here. For over 150 years of our republic, nationwide injunctions binding parties who weren't even in court were virtually unheard of. These weren't used before the 1960s, and they certainly weren't weaponized the way we see today. But the moment Donald Trump took office, suddenly every liberal district judge in America discovered this magical power to shut down presidential policies nationwide. Think about what this means for our system of government. A single judge in Hawaii or California can now override the will of the American people and stop a president elected by 74 million Americans from implementing his agenda. That's not how our constitutional republic is supposed to work. That's judicial tyranny, plain and simple. Senator Hawley brilliantly exposed the core problem here. When Professor Shaw was asked for a legal principle that determines when nationwide injunctions are appropriate versus when they're not, he couldn't provide one. 6 minutes of questioning. And the best this Harvard-educated legal scholar could offer was basically that it depends on whether he likes the president or not. This is the intellectual bankruptcy of the modern left. They don't have principles. They have preferences. When their guy is in office, nationwide injunctions are attacks on democracy. When our guy is in office, anything goes because orange man bad. The professor even had the audacity to suggest that Trump engages in more lawless activity than other presidents, which is why he deserves this treatment. Really? More lawless than a president who unilaterally changed immigration law, weaponized the IRS against political opponents, and used federal agencies to spy on political campaigns? Give me a break. What we're seeing is a complete politicization of our judicial system. Liberal judges shop for friendly venues, issue nationwide injunctions against conservative policies, and then academics like Professor Shaw provide intellectual cover for this judicial activism by claiming it's all perfectly normal and constitutional. But here's what they don't want you to understand. This isn't about Trump. This is about fundamentally changing how our government works. They want to establish a precedent where unelected federal judges can override the executive branch whenever liberals disagree with policy. Today, it's immigration and healthcare. Tomorrow, it could be your Second Amendment rights or your religious freedom. The framers never intended for individual district judges to have this kind of power. They designed a system of checks and balances, not judicial supremacy. When courts start acting like super legislators, they're undermining the very foundation of democratic governance. Senator Hawley made another crucial point that everyone needs to understand. Our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. But that's exactly what we have now. Liberal academics, liberal judges, and liberal politicians all working together to use whatever tools necessary to stop conservative governance. They don't care about consistency. They don't care about precedent. They don't care about the long-term damage they're doing to our institutions. All they care about is power and stopping anyone who threatens their progressive agenda. This hearing perfectly illustrates why we need serious judicial reform. We need to end judge shopping. We need to limit the power of district judges to issue nationwide injunctions. And we need to hold legal academics accountable when they abandon scholarship for political activism. The good news is that people like Senator Hawley are willing to call out this hypocrisy. The bad news is that there are far too many Professor Shaws in our law schools, training the next generation of lawyers and judges to view the Constitution as an obstacle to progressive change rather than the foundation of our republic. This is why your vote matters. This is why we need to support candidates who will appoint originalist judges who actually follow the law instead of making it up as they go along. And this is why we need to stay informed about these issues, even when the mainstream media ignores them. Make sure you share this video with everyone you know. The American people deserve to see how our legal establishment really operates. They deserve to know that the same people lecturing us about democracy and the rule of law are the ones systematically undermining both. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Conservative Call, and hit that notification bell. We're going to keep exposing this corruption and holding these people accountable no matter how much they hate it. Thanks for watching, Patriots. Stay strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for our republic.